Yeah, you're good.
Right, so we've been called to order here, got a quorum. This is a special 30-minute session that we scheduled last week well, actually, it looks like it got scheduled for an hour. But anyways, the intent is to kind of go over the final edits that we believe we have for the annual report to the legislature. So I'm going to turn it over to Jess, who can share what she has on the screen, and then we can walk through what is left to be a review, and then hopefully get to a point of voting for adoption and sending this on to the legislature.
Great. Josiah, can you give me, or Mark, can you give me screen sharing ability?
Yep, I got you.
Oh, awesome. And one more request, Josiah, sorry. Can you send out the draft that we worked on to everyone? I'm going to share my screen, but just so that everyone has it.
Yes, just a minute.
Okay. So as we go through this, I'll walk us through, but Josiah is going to send a hard copy to everyone so you can follow along if that's easier for you or just so that you have it. Let me get my. I just want to start by thanking everyone who wrote in and contributed and kind of followed my my plea to provide actual content and edits. I think it was super, super helpful, and it made, kind of buttoning this up a lot easier on myself. So, and Josiah, so thank you. I would say that the bulk of the edits that have occurred between this meeting and last, we did take some content suggestions from folks, but a lot of it is really, thank you, Chris Curtis, was really just in the way that we kind of structured the report to ensure that we were actually answering the statutory charge and questions that are in statute that we needed to with the report. So you'll see here that I just kind of wrote, this report focuses on answering the questions outlined, and each section of the report intends to reflect the council's recommendation based on those. The introduction here goes through the current landscape and future of AI in Vermont. This is mostly unchanged. I do think John Cohn, he provided some suggestions to kind of clarify some of this and button it up and tighten it up. So thank you, John, if you're on. So we actually removed some things from here, but didn't add much. So this just goes through the current landscape of AI and the future of AI in Vermont and kind of what we expect. And then we go right into this first section, which is answering the first question that we have in statute, which is, shall the scope of the division be expanded to include AI outside of state government? Oh, Josiah, I see you changed a little bit of the wording here. So I think sorry, I'm seeing this for the first time. So we recommend expanding the focus of the AI Division Council to serve as a hub and educational body framework for use outside of state government. Okay, so that's the recommendation then. So I guess we're saying, yes, the recommendation is that we do expand it, but in just this specific way, which is to serve as a hub, an educational body, that's the expansion of the division. Oh, I see a hand. Sorry, I'm not looking at Teams, but I do see a hand kind of flagging at the upper, and I think Chris, it might be you.
Thanks. Yeah, just friendly amendment on that. I wrote this in the chat as well so people can see it, but I just would suggest saying create and share best practices, because unless or until we're moving beyond a clearinghouse model, we're not actually going to be creating best practices like in a regulatory sense. So I think it would be just create and share ultimately policymakers are going to decide. It's not really for the council to decide, but I think we can certainly create and share all of those various best practices. And it might be in the future that there's a recommendation along those lines, but for now, it seems like that's where we're at. At least that's my recollection.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask a
Yeah, I was gonna
question
say,
about,
John, you're also, yep, sorry.
yeah, the specific ask of 2 more FTEs to move forward. That's new in this draft, isn't it? It was specific about what we needed.
Yeah, that was in response to your comments, John, and
Excellent.
Denise, and I don't know if John Kelly are on. If you want to confirm that that is an like, I know it's squishy to make requests for things without making sure that they've gone through the budgetary process. Are we okay to include that ask in this report, or do we need to say ADS is making a separate ask and leave this nebulous?
John is not on, but
No, I am.
Oh,
on.
John Kelly.
Yeah. Oh, John.
Different John.
Sorry.
Sorry, John. Yeah,
No
John
worries.
Kelly. I believe it does need to be done as a separate request through ADS, given
Yeah.
where the positions would sit. So that would probably have to be reworded differently here. And this is my first time seeing this. The copy that I have doesn't have this language in there.
I think we can reword it simply to say that the division plans to request
Yeah,
instead of easily.
Yeah, that's just as good. I thought it left it, saying, hey, we're not staffed to do it, but didn't say what we were going to do about it. I think if we say we're going to make a budgetary ask somewhere else, it's just as good.
Yep.
It's saying that the division plans to request 2 more FTEs. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I would say 2 additional rather than the word more, not to get too nitpicky,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, just
Devil's advocate, if you want to avoid having people have a reaction to it and it's going to go through another process, it wouldn't be terrible if you didn't say exactly what it was in here.
I mean, like just say additional resources and then not mention 2 specific.
That might be, it might have some thought. I think when you present it, you should have more justification for what they would do. So I think you can signal the intent we're acting on this, but without having to raise eyebrows. Just a thought.
I like that because then it becomes sort of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't say the word negotiable, but
I do feel a little bad for the folks from ADS that are on the call because I'm on here. I'm gonna actually recommend that that whole suggestion does get revised, because if the division is the one planning the additional request, not the council, then it really shouldn't make its way into this document. So I would say, one, they're not additional resources, they are resources. And if the division is the one ultimately responsible and the council's not making the recommendation, then it needs to not be included in here.
Could it be referenced though that another body would make those? In
I
other
would
words,
suggest that if the council is recommending that resources be allocated to this type of activity, that's a better recommendation of the council rather than putting another division's content in the council's document.
Understand.
Just wanted to chime in on that. I think it's right that the division requests additional resources if it needs it. And this is one of the concerns I've kind of raised all along, which is like resources are scarce throughout state government. So I think each agency or division would need, before the council could, as a body, recommend 2 additional FTEs, which benefit the division and further the work. I think each agency and division of state government would have to internally decide for itself whether if those, I don't think any agency or division that is not ADS wouldn't want to be in the position of saying, oh, well, you recommended these 2 positions for AI. So does that mean that the other position that might be at issue in your home base isn't as relevant, or you'd be willing to sacrifice that? I'm not in a position to say that for the AGO. So I'm cautious about suggesting that the council can just kind of unilaterally push for new FTEs when resources are so scarce.
Secretary, are you comfortable with this if I took out that last sentence, or sorry, were you saying that you wanted more adjusted in this paragraph?
Let me have Josiah speak up first, because if this
Okay.
is a
Okay.
collaboration of both the council and the AI division's response, Josiah, what are you proposing?
So, let me say, just for starters, I added that line, kind of in alignment with, like to align with, John's recommendation. I think I don't care whether it's specific, like a specific number. I think, I think it, like having talked this through over the last several weeks, I think it is clear to the council that in order to support any expanded mission, we should allocate additional resources. So I think having something like, I dropped something in chat, the council to recommend that additional resources be allocated to ADS to support these responsibilities. I think that is good. And I think the reason that John raised this in his comments on this was that we were recognizing that when the legislature created a whole new division, they created it with one position and gave it a lot of responsibility with one position. And so there's a level of, we need to catch up uh, the responsibilities that we added to ADS, and also position ourselves to do something forward looking. And so that's why I think, from the conversations the council has had over the last several weeks and over the last year, it makes sense to say the council is recommending, but
Yes.
leave it vague as to what exactly, like how many. Just say
I agree with that.
recommending that additional be allocated.
Yeah, I agree with that, Josiah. I think that's actually what they're asking us for, really, right? Like, um, as you pointed out, this is very much a forward-looking, like expanding into new territory type council. And so they're asking us to go through that maturity process of first talking about, like we did in previous years, of like, what we can start the structure, and now we've got the start of that structure, and what do we need to grow it? What do we plan to do with it? I think is the question.
And I think separating it from a specific ask lets the administration make the call um, about whether to do that in this year or in a future budget year. But I think in order to do the work that's already being done, ADS has already pulled positions from other places to make that happen. And I think it's reasonable to recognize that in this report, both from the council and from the division perspective.
Yeah. And John, your hand is up. I don't want to continue to ignore you. I apologize. Was it? Oh, okay. Didn't need to be up. Okay. So
I just dropped in the chat, if additional duties or expansion of the council or the division are approved by lawmakers, they should consider whether additional resources are required. That might be one way to thread the needle.
Um, we can do that. I guess I'm interested in hearing other counselors, because that's very similar to what we had before that prompted the whole conversation. So like John, like you had the initial comment that kind of raised this as, we're not really saying anything. Does that cut it for you, or would you still be looking for something a little bit stronger?
Oh,
John's muted, but Jess, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I
was just
like
gonna
it. I think
say,
it's adequate.
um, and again, this could just be going back to, where we kind of started, and being vague, and I think that we're having this conversation to address the vagueness, but I do think that in a way this paragraph kind of already signals to the legislature, like, if there is this desire to expand the scope, then staffing would need to be addressed. So I don't think it, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think
So
we
just leave what's there and call it good.
Yeah, I don't think it puts us too far out on a limb that,
Yeah, and again, I know it's vague, and I know that there's a little, like, that can be uncomfortable, but I think
Um,
if we don't have a recommendation, and I don't think that we should, um, regarding like the number of staffing, I don't think that we've maybe done the due diligence to best understand what is exactly going to be, what would be needed, like how much money would be needed. Is it really two people? Is it, I don't know. And I also agree with Chris that it's a little uncomfortable to, make a request on behalf of a division without.
Can I ask a question? I think this language is okay. I'm just trying to remember back to the original language, which I think didn't make that one. It didn't say that we needed more and someone should consider it, which this does. Am I right that this is a tiny bit stronger than the original, or is this the original language? I think it's a tiny bit stronger. It's a little bit more like it's not just complaining we don't have what we need. We're saying, if you want us to do more stuff, you ought to think this through. Am I right that this is a little bit different than what was in there before?
It might be a little bit stronger. Yeah,
I
it's
think
probably
I think
a little
it's
bit stronger. So
strong enough. Strong enough. I think it says what we need.
So I'm going to delete this then and just leave it the way that it is. Do people want to sit with this for a minute and just kind of gauge comfortability? Because I don't want to rush people through this either.
I would just, one final friendly amendment, I would say would likely need to be addressed. I mean, this is all
That's
conditional, and so it depends on the size and scope of what lawmakers might elect to do. I mean, it's one thing if they say, yep, this is so hugely important, we're going to shift and create an entire regulatory body similar to what California has done. Obviously, that would just create an entirely different agency within state government and would require a wholly different level of staffing, resources, and expertise. If it's simply modifying in some way, shape, or form sort of the nature of the council or divisional duties of ADS, maybe it's like one staff person, or maybe the request comes back to the division that, can somebody shift their duties and, we take a halftime of a position and devote it, to this. And so it's more incremental. And so we just don't know. I think it's all conditional. Or, frankly, lawmakers might simply, as they sometimes do, say, hey, we have a division. We're just going to direct it to do more using existing resources. And that's just going to be outlined in statute. Like, I don't know. So, would need to be addressed is, basically saying anything you do, there is going to have to be more resources. I just think saying would likely need to be addressed leaves the door open to, like, what is the size and scope? What are you asking of either this body or the division? And then allowing either the members or the division itself to speak for themselves when or if, those asks are made. But, there is a proud history and tradition of unfunded mandates across all types of governments and jurisdictions, and Vermont is not immune. And so sometimes people are tasked with things that are just folded into existing operations. And so that can be a serious challenge. So I think lawmakers would do well if there's an expansion to consider those resources. But the short answer is we just don't know. So it's likely that those resources would have to be deployed.
And I think that's that at least we're taking a position. but then we're leaving it open. I think that's fine.
Anything else for this section? I am not going to attempt to do format editing in front of everyone, so I will address this. Oh, there I go. I will address this at a later time by myself. But we are moving on to section 2, which is answering the question, are there any changes to the structural oversight, membership, or powers and duties of the AI Council? So as we were talking about the expansion of the division previously, we are now talking about, are there recommendations for expansion of oversight, membership, powers or duties of the council? And the answer is yes. Um, we are, we kind of go through so we go through why the council was created, when we envision our work being completed, right? Thank you, Chris, for kind of reorganizing this. I think that makes a lot more sense. And then we go into our actual recommendations, right? Because we said, yes, we actually do have recommendations. We have membership changes recommendations, which include a member appointed by the Secretary of Human Services with experience in healthcare delivery, a member appointed by the Secretary of Education, a member appointed by the Arts Council, a member appointed by the Commissioner of the Department of Economic Development representing small business, and a member appointed by the VTA, who is an expert in digital privacy. So those are the membership changes that we are requesting. Are there any additions or comments, or anyone have anything to say or anything about any of these? I think Josiah and I created this list just based on some of the conversations that we've been having in the last couple weeks about needs on the council, but open also,
I just might add in deference to lawmakers, just a last bullet that just says, or other members as seen, as recommended or referred to by lawmakers. It's just, I think we all have our own ideas about like who makes sense to be on this, but lawmakers might have their own ideas, and I don't know that this is exhaustive or if it encapsulates, everyone that they think would make sense. So just allowing, telegraphing to them that this body has some deference to them, and they may have their own thoughts or suggestions about who appropriate members might be. One, I would note, having an extremely large body can become unwieldy, and I don't know that I think there was some brief discussion about like, should there be a cap or a limit on the total number of members? And like, that could be, we could also just flag that, lawmakers might want to consider, creating a limit. I don't know that we can just pull that number out of the air, but
how many are we right now, Josiah?
We're 10 right now.
10.
I guess, yeah, and I recognize what Chris is saying about like lots of members becomes unwieldy. I've been on a couple of states task forces that have like 30 to 40, and that's a decision that they've made. But I guess one thing that stands out to me is like this is a report from us to the legislature. I don't know that it's necessary to be too deferential. I think like we're making recommendations. We want to make them like fairly focused because like these are things that we actually want. And I don't think like they can add more people if they feel like it. And I think they know that. And if they go to do that, then there will certainly be testimony and we'll have the opportunity to say, yeah, feel free to add these additional, whatever other groups that you want to, but keeping the limit so it's not, dozens. I I think that with the addition of these five, it's like pretty big. Um, I don't know that I'd want to go much bigger. And we had some discussion about whether the Arts Council folks like does it make sense for that group or there was one other one I think we talked about like does it make sense to have them be um, full-time members or just like maybe we have the ability to tap them if we are looking for that perspective in a particular conversation. I don't have a strong preference there. But I think if we're going to have like another structure of a pool of people we tap for expertise in specific conversations, if we were to do that, we'd want to have more than one in that pool. And so I think that given that there's only one at this point, I think having someone representing the art community, especially with the recent work on copyright and some of the other stuff that's going on, makes sense. So I'm pretty happy with this list. We've gone back and forth on it a few times, but if anyone has anything else to add, happy to add anything else.
Does
Is there
anyone
a
else have
reason
any
that
thought? Yep.
Oh, is there a reason that DFR dropped off? Because I think banking and insurance and the future of AI that will be used to pull data and make decisions and references within those industries is huge or potentially
Yes,
huge.
that was the
Risk
other one
management.
that we had talked about with the Arts Council. It was DFR and the Arts Council. We had talked about that, and I don't know where the DFR recommendation went. Was that was a thing at one point. So that's a good call. Thanks.
Finance and regulation?
Financial
It's financial.
regulation. Yep.
Financial regulation, sorry. Are there any other thoughts on, I am a little hesitant to also allow the legislature to add more members. Again, one, I agree with Josiah. I think that they know that they already have this authority. And I think
I don't have any
they,
objection to taking that out.
are there any other thoughts by any other members?
If you believe that it is important to keep it in there, maybe request that it not max to a certain number. So, recommended no more than X, 1, 2, 3, or just remove it entirely.
Remove it. They'll add it if they want it.
Agreed.
I don't know who that was, but do
Mr.
we?
Sussman.
Bill.
Okay, thanks. I am inclined to remove it if there are no other.
Is there anything that's expressly prohibiting us from forming subcommittees? I've not heard that discussed
Josiah,
before.
yeah, Josiah and I talked a little bit about this. I didn't think that there was anything, but I thought, Josiah, you said there was a legal interpretation that you inquired about that might have prohibited us from doing this.
Means if it's a subcommittee that expands membership, and like it's a subcommittee that's not repurposing or using the existing membership, I could see it. But if it's
That's that's what this was about, was including non-council members to discuss specific tasks. I think might have been on the heels of the presentation that Phil and his team did on security, and then some conversations. Anyway, we had talked about some like specific industry focused things that we might want to do in future, and just having the ability to pull in non-council members to help us think through things in subcommittees was not a capability that we had, was where we had landed.
Just a mechanical question, even if we did, would they be subject to open meeting laws and everything? They would, wouldn't they?
If there's a quorum of the members, they're subject to the open meeting
Okay.
law.
Okay. Well, let me
Sorry,
say
a
it.
quorum of the subcommittee.
So
A quorum of, that's what I was wondering is,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want this to look like a way of getting around the open meetings.
No, it doesn't. So it really doesn't. The subcommittees have to hold open meetings as well.
Okay,
There's a quorum of that group.
okay.
So I've seen this both ways. I've seen, I've been a part of groups like the State Workforce Development Board where we have explicit authority to create and form subcommittees. I've been on, blue ribbon commissions where we're not given that express authority, but we do it anyway, and have that inform some of our work and some of the reports. So if we want to ask for this, if we're asking for things anyway that there might be, adjacent legislation for, this might be something that we ask to have clarified, just so that we're sure that we're in accordance with,
Yeah. Yeah, I think,
especially because we're advisory right now, right? So,
yeah, and we are talking about, possibly having some in-depth new strategies next year. So it would be nice just to ask up front, I guess.
so then our third question is, shall the council cease to exist on a certain date? We are saying no. In short, given that this landscape, continues to evolve, we find that our mission should continue. We do, in the second half, we talked about, I think 2 meetings ago, proposing this kind of 2-year cycle with the automatic renewal unless the legislature takes action to terminate us. So that is what that kind of details here. So unless the legislature says otherwise, we continue to exist, according to this part of the report. Okay. And then are there additional tasks that the division should complete? And the answer is yes. We are proposing that, and so this is almost us, right? This is us as the council proposing that the division collect, create, and house best practices and policy related to AI use, function, and application. The division should act as this hub of information and to serve the legislature, Vermont businesses, and other institutions. I think we put that in there to address our question on education, with support on best practices by collecting and sharing the work of the AI Council. Let's see here. There's this is the first time I'm reading this section. I think, John, you might have said this, that we will hold quarterly updates for the legislature, businesses, and other states to familiarize them with the contents of this hub that we're calling it. This additional task is within the scope that exists for the division already. Does not require legislative action.
I did put that language in, and but I'm also sensitive to the fact that what are we signing? Would we be able to do that or something like that? I mean, the fact I thought just a hub and a repository was kind of passive. Are you comfortable? Are we all comfortable with signing up to do something like that? Or, I made up quarterly. That takes work. I certainly would be happy to help on it. Yeah.
I mean, it might not be, I don't know if, and I would obviously absolutely welcome other folks' thoughts on this, but we hold open meetings already, right? So if
Mhm.
if the council is going to direct the division to do this work, I'm assuming that the division is going to communicate on this work in some type of way. So maybe
Mhm.
it's like, with our annual report, we report it and then we already hold open meetings, right? So we hold an open meeting to review the report and we invite the legislature and Vermont businesses and others to kind of attend, and listen to the work of the hub and the division. I'm not sure quarterly might be needed. I don't know if the work is going to happen that fast to
Yeah,
produce.
I was just go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think like I put quarterly because that was one of the options that John suggested. I think maybe twice a year would be appropriate. And yeah,
Yeah.
I was with you, Jess, that it would fit well into the meeting format we already have, but we'd have kind of a much more open discussion with the folks who are participating who aren't part of the council. So if the topic for that, I don't know, 6-month period was on education, we'd more forcefully invite schools and educators and receive feedback on what materials they found useful or which things would be useful for the council to and the division to explore further to support their work.
That
Or if the
sounds,
legislature has specific topics
yeah.
they want to address. I guess that's the other big one to me.
I think that sounds less passive. I mean, in other words, if I understood this, we would use our normal meeting format, and the only thing we might do is communicate that, the council will now be talking about education, and so if legislators wanted to join, so we wouldn't do a special thing, but we would do a little bit of advertising if we were going to bring up one of those topics that referred to material in the hub. Is that what I understood?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And so then we go on to say, we think that we are proposing that the division, create this hub, act as this hub. And then in the next section, we kind of direct the division's focus by asking questions. So,
Jess,
yep.
Phil had a suggestion in the chat
Oh,
that I
I'm
think is
sorry.
eminently reasonable, which was
Oh, go
hold
ahead. Sorry.
updates from time to time as content is added in specific content areas.
Sorry for
Um,
using content twice in the same sentence.
Is that in the chat? Sorry.
It is.
Yes.
No, we're
Okay.
totally content that you did that.
Thank you so much. Okay, I see it now.
Change the
And
second
Jess,
content to
as you're
domain.
making that, ooh, that's slick. The other one that I'm looking at is the list of entities we're serving at the bottom of the first paragraph should probably match the one in the middle of the second paragraph. So I
Can
think
you,
other institutions was one.
sorry, can you,
So the division will be able to serve legislature, Vermont businesses, and other institutions. Maybe change. I think we had other states, but other institutions is more appropriate than states.
and then I'm just seeing Chris's comments here. Hang on one second. Okay, collect
Chris is
and
suggesting we
house.
strike the word create.
Okay.
And I think I'm torn on that because the council already has created a bunch of best practices, right? Has already created best practices around monitoring, around data management, and those practices that the council has already created, I think are reasonable to include in the hub, even though those won't be directly applicable to, say, legislature. That is content and guidelines we've created, and we have made them normative for the state, but they're still reasonable material to include in the hub, in my view. So I think we should leave create in, but I'm open to other people's ideas.
Fine with that as long as it's made clear that that's internal to state government and state government use.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I have seen people from outside of state government like reach out about our code of ethics and whether they can adopt it, like use it as their starting place for the framework for their business. And so like that's fine. So I think like we are creating material. It is applicable outside of state government. It's only normative inside.
Hey, Josiah, something you said just triggered something. Because I joined late. I had wondered, I know this report is to answer those 4 questions, but nowhere in this report does it say that we had come up with any of those things. Did
I
we
think
decide there was no need? Okay, great.
I think it was right before you jumped on. I tried to add based on your feedback some about that up near the
Yeah, okay.
top.
Yeah, I don't think we need to be exhaustive, but just to say, hey, we've been doing some stuff. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Josiah, would you be comfortable if we say like acting as and creating?
No, I think where it was collect, create, and house best practices in the line right above.
Thank you for that. Okay. Um, so again, we, as the AI council, we're saying, yes, we have these recommendations. The council shall act as this hub, or the division shall act as this hub. And then specifically, we are asking the division to focus on 3 tasks, and we define those 3 tasks by asking some questions. So, are there opportunities for AI education? And if so, at what levels? Are there opportunities for solving intractable government problems? Are there opportunities for using AI to address Vermont's workforce and demographic challenges? And how can emerging technology how could, excuse me, an emerging technology regulatory body be constructed within the state of Vermont? We are also, so we're asking them to initially focus on these questions and then also focus on community engagement on AI policy and practices, and then the development, to develop and procure a monitoring process for within state government. And I think we probably we might want to reframe this part of the sentence if we're taking out our.
Do we want to call it an AI hub? Because in AI vernacular, that's generally a place to host AI projects. We could at some point build a public AI hub, but I don't know, like calling it an AI hub kind of leans towards that right now. Is that what we're thinking?
Jess and I went back and forth on what to
Yeah.
call it because we had clearinghouse. Lots of people in their comments said, no, don't call it a clearinghouse. So then we were really struggling with what to call it instead. So we landed on hub. Happy to have other suggestions, and maybe I can dig up the other dozen things we looked at that we said no to.
Yeah.
I
'Cause
think
hub,
I think hub is like not so much a term dart that like we could use it in this context, but there are certainly if somebody has another suggestion, I'm happy to have it.
What was the
I,
objection to clearinghouse?
Just that it was again, I think it was in the context of it's passive and
Yeah.
it's
Okay, great.
it's not clear what exactly like it didn't match the things that we were saying it was supposed to do because it was making these 4 kind of recommendations or these 4 areas to like explore and kind of pull stuff together about felt a little bit less like a clearinghouse to a couple of the counselors.
yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to like throw out hub, just trying to make sure that folks understand that hub is being used like next door in New York. You know, there's Empire AI, which is they're calling their public AI hub. And it's it's gonna be an actual AI infrastructure that people can, for public purposes, build learning models and host data and stuff like that. And California is doing something similar with CalComp, and that's starting to become sort of the more normal use of the word AI hub, that kind of thing. So just want to, I agree though, Josiah, that it's not so specific that we couldn't use it for what we're calling it. It's just at some point it may create some confusion, just letting you know.
Just to that point, that would be a great thing to aspire to because there is a supercomputer, tiny, but a supercomputer cluster at UVM that we had talked about possibly making some sort of a public access for it. So maybe someday we were like that.
Catamount AI.
What's that?
Paramount AI.
Yeah, something like that. Why not?
Oh, you don't really want to talk about the underused supercomputer center at UVM, the bane of Senator Leahy's existence for so many years, do you?
Is it really that, is it that badly utilized?
Says the guy from Norwich. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Just
don't
Now,
know
New
any.
York
the
is a
introduction of this sort of capitalized term AI hub, I think is going to be a little misleading. Like it sounds like we've sort of created this new thing when really we're just talking about like gathering and dissemination of policy, uh, best practices, the ethics code, what have you, at least at this point. So even in like this section, it says the AI hub will initially focus on. It's like no, the division is going to focus on those questions. The resource to help answer those questions is going to be the clearinghouse or the hub or whatever you want to call it, probably bolstered, by this council. So I just making it sound like something that it's not by sort of like capitalizing it, making it sound like it's a thing. It just seems to me like it's a little misleading or confusing.
Agreed,
I mean, if we're
Chris.
really
So
just talking about continuation of the work that the council's already doing, that the division's already doing, but we want lawmakers to understand and memorialize that, like, yeah, like this is going to be a very active, dynamic, ongoing role and place. And it's very likely that in the future, all of these things that are being collected, best practices, models from other jurisdictions, ideas, are going to filter out to lawmakers, either because we're asked to in the form of specific reports and recommendations, or sua sponte. Either the council or the division is going to be doing that because they already have, the division already has that capacity. They can say, hey, we looked at this other state, they're doing this great thing, we think Vermont should do it too. That's already well within its powers. So I just yeah. The only other thing I noted was that I wanted to mention was on the quarterly reporting. I would really caution us to get caught in a position where we're creating a condition on ourselves as a council or on the division to every quarter generate a report to lawmakers. I mean, they will gladly accept that. I'm sure they would endorse that very quickly. But it seems unusual. Most councils and working groups and task forces that I've ever been a part of definitely have an annual reporting requirement, and I certainly don't have any objection to that. But I just wonder what's the utility or practicality of quarterly reporting.
it looks like that was already
Yep.
removed, though.
Yeah, we removed
okay.
that, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Just because, I mean, we certainly can, and it may be that from time to time, as we see fit, it makes sense to do that. But I also don't want to create an artificial thing where it's like, oh, sorry, not much happened last quarter. Like, here's your report, and then they're sort of getting frustrated.
Yeah, wasn't our answer there that we were going to use this meeting format, and then if there was going to be an annual kind of overview of the contents of the or a conversation about something like education, we would invite people to participate in these meetings. Is that correct?
So I think what we did was, so what I did here was I took I think, Chris, what you might have recommended, and I put that up here in the top. And just to say that additionally, the council will, I think I should say maybe. Will hold updates as necessary or requested as content is added in specific domain areas for the legislature, Vermont businesses, and other institutions. I see this as kind of saying we're leaving it up to us. Like if we start doing, if we focus a subgroup or start doing a bunch of work on education and we say, okay, I think we're ready to kind of release this and invite members, target some of the invites that we send out to meetings to folks in education to hear about this, and we have the ability to do that. But we also don't have to do that if it's not necessary.
I like that. So there's never going to be one of those, oh my God, we got to write this report.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you, Chris. I don't think that, especially quarterly reporting in state government with how fast we move or not fast. Go ahead, Secretary.
I am probably going to give some of you whiplash, but I'm going to go back to, I think that hub should be sufficient. And the reason being is just what you said, Jessica, which is that as content is added, well, now we get to the point of added to what? And so a hub is a really easy central repository, central location, single area that folks can go to have the information that you guys are all compiling and that the division's compiling too. So not to hurt your necks, but I think that hub is a good generalization for now. And you're just starting on this. So if you find that there is additional requirements, clarification, definition, or fill in the blank down the road, that you want to limit or create additional capacity for this hub, you can do so in these annual reports. But I would just say right now, that's a generic enough term where people can depend on going to that central location. And I agree, Chris, not marketing it as a brand name hub and lowercasing it definitely keeps that generalization.
So I wrote here, that the council proposes that the division collect, create, and house best practices and policies. And then I say the division, acting as a quote hub for these resources and information, will be able to serve both the legislature, Vermont businesses, and other institutions. So we're saying that that the division as a whole is acting as a hub for all of these resources and this information, this data that we're requesting that they pull together. Does that maybe clarify for people, rather than creating a hub, the division is acting as the hub for this stuff?
I lean toward creating something because um like we've got some stuff on the website now, but I think like having a more formal, not like super formal, but like a place where people can find things that are relevant that's not a single web page, I think is useful. And so creating a thing that serves as this, well, that does create some overhead for us to maintain. Like we think we are going to continue investing in this as a state, and so I think it makes sense to have it be an actual thing, not just a function of the division.
Try to work this out in the next 5 minutes as a group. Josiah, why don't you and I connect on putting in some language here that addresses that? That's more general in nature, and it, as the secretary said, is rather than defining something as just, we are creating something general and not branding something. And then we'll send it around in the final draft for people to comment on.
Great.
Just because I want to make sure that we're.
Are there any broad stroke things that we can answer first before,
Well, actually, that's the end of the report.
Oh, okay.
So unless folks have any, comments or thoughts on the questions that we asked, again, I think Josiah and I pulled these from the conversations that we've had over the last, the last two meetings, over some questions that we might ask to inform our work rather than trying to address them in the report. I'm still gonna flag number 2. Because I do think that community engagement, and I know that I don't know if Susanna's on, but community engagement, like when done correctly and with intention, can be very costly and resource heavy. So just want to flag that we're not setting us, we're specific with what maybe we want this to look like. Again, I think we're contemplating oh, sorry, Secretary.
No, don't worry. I think it's fine the way that it's written. It just
Okay.
calls out exactly the point that you described. It's not making specificities around asking for resources. There's no request. It's just making a recommendation, which is what the council does. So I think it's just calling out the need for resources to make this meaningful. I think that's a fair statement.
Third one is to develop a procurement and monitoring process for AI within state government, which again, I think is in the scope of what the division is kind of charged with, so. And then that is the end. Is the end.
The and Delphine.
Delphine. Okay. So I guess Josiah and I will wrap up at least my time here just by saying that Josiah and I will get together and workshop this paragraph to kind of address some of the comments and thoughts that we just heard around the use of the hub and the creation. And then we will send this out to everyone for kind of final comments and feedback. And then plan on, let me just bring up a calendar here. It is due next Wednesday. So plan on sending it, on or before next Wednesday. We don't want to act too eager, right? We don't want to act too eager. Yeah, go ahead, Josiah.
This Mark. So just to make sure
Oh.
we get like the voting on the final, like as we did with.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, yeah. So as we did last year, we essentially just sent it around through DocuSign. Do we want to do that again?
Do not know how to do that, but I will allow maybe someone else can volunteer to create that and do that once we finalize.
I can assist with that.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that's the avenue we wanted to go as we did last year. Or if we had
as long as it is within the like our authority to use DocuSign, which I think actually we discussed at length last year as well.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes. Then yes, let's do it.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Cool.
So Jessica, will you all send out, I know, I don't know if it's prudent to get it before the close of business today, but whatever final draft
Yep.
there is, at least by Monday, and that way we can all run it up through our chains of command and just make sure our front offices all have awareness and that there's no question about the nature of the vote. That would be
Sure. So I will,
Cool.
so I will send it out, and also Mark is going to send it out with the DocuSign. Like we'll make sure that it is accompanied with the DocuSign so that before you sign, you have, ample time to kind of do what you need to do in your perspective.
And because we recognize that people don't probably sit around watching their emails as quickly, but we probably will have a short window to get this signed. So we'll probably just wait until we have a quorum of signatures. Like we'll wait up until like a last minute, but we're just looking for a quorum of signatures at that point. We kind of ran into this last year too, so I just wanted that's why it was fresh in my head. There will be no signing precedence or anything, order of precedence of signers. It just, boom, out to the group.
Jess, the reason my hand was up, was that paragraph, changing hub in there, like I don't think is that crucial. So I think it may just save a lot of back and forth to go ahead and adopt this now since we have quorum, if that works for everybody. Just as it is, because that was the only thing we were going to change, right? Like the rest of it's good.
If that's the case, then yeah, I think that's good. And then we can take a vote here. If
Yeah, and then we don't have to do the
anybody wants the motion.
email quorum thing. I'll go on. You guys can motion.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor of adopting this year's report as essentially as it stands, with no substantial edits. In favor, say aye or raise your hand or whichever.
Aye.
Okay. Any nays?
Well, I'm just going to abstain until I see the final version, until I have approval from my front office to sign off.
Okay. And you're my next. So we do have one abstention with Chris, but you're more of a pending abstention. All right. So we do have approval, but we're not trying to cut anybody out of the conversation here. So we'll go through what we said before as well.
But we don't need to do the DocuSign, right, Mark?
We're not going to do the DocuSign, but
Okay.
I think Chris's
We'll just send it
timeline
around.
to, yeah, prime timeline to get the copy and, give him time to get approval and all that would be nice too.
Yeah, I mean, if we have a yay vote, then we'll certainly signal that before Wednesday, probably by Monday or Tuesday. But I'm sure it'd be nice to be able to say there was unanimous consent, but if not, that's fine too. You've got a quorum. So I always like to see a final product before especially if there are tweaks remaining to be made, just want to make sure.
No objections.
Well,
No, I was
You
just, I
can
was
just
just,
note the abstention in the
Yeah.
final, just note there was one abstention. He doesn't even need to follow up if we have a quorum in favor.
well,
Unless the AGO wants to be on record as supporting the recommendation. So, yeah,
Just let us know, Chris. Just let us know.
yeah,
will do.
Okay.
basically, Chris, yeah, okay. Just let us know.
So I
We're
know
not-
it's
we don't-
very lawyerly of me to want to read the final draft before I agree to anything.
and I've not done it enough
Always
times.
one. No, I'm just kidding, Chris. There's always, and what I mean by that is there's always one lawyer, right?
We have Michelle though too, that I think.
Oh, yes.
But yes.
I
no
am not a
problem there, Chris.
council member, though. I'm just a advisor.
Yeah. And okay, so I don't think we have any objections to what we got pathwise. With that, I think I'm gonna seek motions to adjourn here.
Yeah, thank you all thank you, Josiah and Jess for working this.
Yes.
I move that we adjourn. And our second, what was needed, whatever was needed.
Yep. And I heard a second in
Before
there, so
before
I'll.
we,
Josiah, did you have something
I
you
just
wanted
wanted
to
to
say?
recognize that normally we have to go to public comment
Public
period.
comment.
We don't have to because there are no additional members of the public on who have not already commented. So I think we can go straight to adjourning. That was all I just wanted to say for the record.
Okay. All right. All in favor of adjourning, you can raise your hand or say aye.
All right.
All right. Noes or abstentions. Okay. Well, the ayes have it. We're good to go. Onward and upward. Adelante, siempre adelante.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Like,